Well, I've had several questions already about the discussions and mostly related to the group, and I got kind of excited because I saw there was already one comment posted to the trial, and when I got there, that's exactly what that was. And I don't mind posting it or letting everybody see it because you can go see it on D2L, but Gina posted as she's having a difficult time finding the groups and which one I am in. That's because simply I have not assigned groups yet, and usually I wait a day or two or three, maybe first part of next week when I would actually assign groups. Simply it kind of lets the class roster sort itself out a little bit. In the one section that I have, it's full. I'm not worried about more people adding, but there might be some folks that drop. In the other section that's not full, there might actually be some folks that add. And so that's one of the reasons. Reason number two is, we don't really start that until about I think the third week, when I really want you to get going on the discussions, because I just want to mess around with it a little bit, and while I'm doing some videos, maybe tell you what I look for when I'm doing discussions, okay, or when I'm looking at and grading those types of discussions. So don't get concerned right now about groups, but that said, let's go back and look at the discussions, and you'll see I have threads, and I think my dates are right here. So actually this is going to be week 2 then, so next week we will start and probably group 1 when I get that assigned. So I'll have you up and going, but you'll have all of next week until the 11th to get stuff posted on there. And this week I have, or for now I have, just the trial. Well, what am I looking for? Let's first go back and take a look. I kind of gave some directions, and I also kind of set up a scoring rubric just to give you an idea. I have to admit my scoring rubric is less than objective. It's certainly going to be somewhat subjective, but okay. So of course this says I have assigned the groups. Sorry, but I haven't yet. But next week in the video we'll give more information, but we'll get started. Yet when your group is assigned, you're going to be required to make posts, right? Posts of value will be well thought out and presented and will add to the discussion. Your group should identify some legal issues related to the case. So I'll probably post a case or a story. It's going to be story, but usually that'll be a case. And for example, public, private, or both. Is it criminal or is it civil? Does it concern contract or property or employment or alternative dispute? Or what are some of the issues? And look through your book. Okay, when you're doing that, you can look through the table of contents and say, oh, well, it's arbitration. Well, maybe that's an alternative dispute. And so you might go look at that section and add some stuff, okay? And again, the list here is far from exhaustive, so you can certainly add. You might find updates to the case. You might find other things if you're doing a little research that you could certainly add. Okay, comments about the case, and that could be pretty wide open. Okay, conjecture about the outcome. What do you think is going to happen, especially if you provide us some sound reasoning? And then I add in here that anybody can post to any thread, and if you post to a thread to which you were not assigned, then extra credit's going to be considered. If you go back to the syllabus, I said that there's a potential for about a 10% or one full letter grade of extra credit that's available for this class, and all of that's really going to be associated with these discussions. So you could start a new thread, especially if you had a case that was relevant. Okay, and so look for cases that are maybe relevant to, and by relevant I mean to the topic matter that we might be discussing. If we're talking about employment law, for example, great. If we're talking about Supreme Court decisions, great. Submit a case maybe that's current and relevant that talks about potential Supreme Court decisions or what's going on the Supreme Court and with the election and those types of things. There's all kinds of interesting topics there. So add to that if you would like to the thread. Start a new thread. That's fine whether you're in that group or not, but especially if you're in that group, do those types of things. So okay, so I apologize because this did say I had assigned the group, but I have not yet at this point in time. And then let's go back and take a look at my grading scoring rubric. And again, I say that it's not an exact science, but the things I'm going to look at, of course, quantity, quality, and timing. And so Okay, the minimum required number of, so for that particular week, this is per week, okay, is 2 that you're assigned. So when it's your group's turn, you need to get in there and post at least twice. But if it's an average post, that's going to only earn you a grade of about a C. Okay. On the other hand, if you get 4 posts of average quality, that might get you up to a B. Okay. And then I'm always hesitant to say that any particular number of posts are going to earn a certain grade. I have had students certainly that had a real interest in a topic, and they've done a lot of research, and they might have just posted one time, but it was such a compelling and interesting post supported by some research and documentation, or sometimes even from personal experience. And that might put me over the top, and I might say that one by itself is worth an A. Okay? And so I'm really interested then in finding some of that quality that adds to the discussion, right? Again, and I have that in here, enhanced by students' personal experience. Now, I don't want you sharing things that you don't want to share, so please don't feel compelled to do that whatsoever, okay? Don't feel compelled to do that whatsoever. But if you have a personal experience, maybe you served on a jury duty, and after the jury's done or the duty's done, you can certainly talk about it. Cases are public, with some exceptions. Certainly you could tell us about that if it happens to fit. Okay, below average posts are often like, I agree with you, Phil, or okay, they carry a little weight. I might give you at least you might not get a 0, for that week, but it might not be a heck of a lot better than that if that's all you put. Okay, timing is also important, and where that came from is I'd have students that wished to join in the conversation, but other students, especially those that were in the assigned group, waited until Sunday night at the end of the week to post their threads or to get things started. And so other students really didn't have a chance to respond. Okay, not that they couldn't get in there themselves. I agree, but it's important, I think, to start early. And you're going to get your assignment, so you're going to know weeks ahead of time, what you're looking at. And so you should be able to get a little bit of a head start on that. And you can get, I don't think I've restricted these things. I think I've got them all so you can get in there a week or 2 at least ahead of time and start that discussion if you so wish. Okay. And there's a few other things that I can look at some straight statistics that D2L gives me, and I guess I add to or detract maybe a little bit based on some of those things. So, okay, so what are going to be the topics? You'll see that I have some there already, but these very well might change, and they might not. Okay, this one, for example, a couple of people have already looked ahead and found that the links here don't work as well as they should. It doesn't give us the full article; it gives us partial article, but the partial actually in that case may be sufficient. Okay, but this one then I have the Ashley Madison lawsuit, and I found this one. I gotta remember there's lots of lawsuits over the Ashley Madison. I think these are families that are suing because people, when the Ashley Madison information was released, and you guys might have to read up on this to find out what that is, but people actually it was exposed that they were cheating on their spouses and whatnot. Some people committed suicide. One priest, I believe it was, it might have been a preacher, I think committed suicide, and so a lot of havoc was happened because of this Ashley Madison information getting stolen, the leak and whatnot. Okay, and so it brings up some interesting points. I guess if you're, if you're going into a website that for the purpose of, having extramarital contact and whatnot, how much privacy then should you be accorded? This one might be, I might leave this one in here because it might be a good one. This started a year ago, but it might be a really good one to see if there's any updates. these things take a lot of time. My guess is that the wheels of justice are still turning, and there's not a lot of official updates as to what's going on. It's also very possible that the case was settled out of court, and we've never seen or will never see anything about what the settlement is. Those things can happen. So, I may leave that one in there. Okay, just gives you an idea, I guess, of the types of things that I kind of look for. And they're interesting. I think I talked a little bit about the Kaepernick one. Where do I find my information? I'll give you a couple hints. Sometimes just good old MSN, right? You got there, but if you come down, you'll find that they have a news. And you got My Topics or US, okay, and maybe US, okay. Let's look at that. Ooh, Rebel Cowboys, how the Bundy family sparked a new battle for the West. So I don't know if you remember this happened, and the Bundys have been involved in a couple of them, right? Okay, of cases where they've kind of stood their ground maybe against the government. So Obamacare choices dwindle. Feds face consumer and political. Ooh, well, is that business law? Boy, I'll tell you what. If you're required to provide health insurance, or if you do provide health insurance, it may be. Okay. Weiner and Huma Abedin. Well, I don't know. Here you go. Judge dismisses Citizens United challenge to New York donors. That one may be especially interesting as the election goes on, and again, that's one that you guys probably haven't followed. But I'll tell you what, the Citizens United decision comes up often, and it'll come up in our discussions and some of the stuff we talk about for specific chapters and whatnot. Drones, rules on drones. Okay, well, what's that have to do with anything? Well, certainly with our privacy, maybe, and whether or not you can fly a drone over your sunbathing neighbor or whatever, or what about? I think I read where Domino's is actually going to start delivering pizzas by drone. Yeah, do we got business law types of stuff all over the place? Absolutely. Okay, so here I am on one page, and I've already found a few. Burkini controversy puzzles Muslim women in New Jersey. Well, in France, they're having a big issue about this, and apparently some French resorts or areas have actually banned burkinis. Well, a burkini is, Muslim women tend to, especially those that are pretty fundamental, they tend to want to be covered up, and some of the issues then are, well, if they're covered that much, couldn't that be allow them to maybe carry bombs or those things that would endanger other people? Yeah, of course, for the French, it just could be that they don't like women running around with that many clothes on. It's hard to say. Okay, so that's one spot, and I've got other services that I look at. New York Times actually sends me an email every morning with some headlines that I usually like to peruse, I should say. I also, on New York Times, is kind of leans to the left a little bit. I often go to the Drudge Report here. It leans to the right, and often I'll find sometimes even they're kind of humorous articles here. All these are little headlines to articles that are coming up, and so I'll take a look at those. And a lot of them, the headlines just aren't going to fit. How about the Syrian refugees coming? And granted, that's going to be a big thing with the presidential election, but what about from a business law standpoint? Yeah. Paris restaurant now, what if you did this in the U.S.? Okay, and those are when you put a case in there, don't just put the case in, put a summary and maybe ask some questions. What would if this was in Paris? You look at that headline and you say, that doesn't have anything to do with U.S. business law. But the question is, what would happen if this were to take place in the U.S.? Keep in mind that we've required people in the U.S. that, for example, don't want to even marry. Okay, we've required preachers that would prefer not to marry gay couples to actually be required to marry those gay couples, and so. There's lots of interesting things in it, and again, there's some content that's associated with that. Well, this is what happened in in Paris. Well, what about the laws in the U.S. and what's happened in the U.S. that might set a precedent that would be similar or contrary to what's going on there? So I've kind of babbled enough, and certainly I've gone on long enough, and so I'm going to stop and let you guys get on with life a little bit, but start looking for these types of headlines and do those types of things, because it will help you add to your discussions, when your group is assigned. I will try to assign those groups then in the next day or two, and that'll get posted on D2L. Thanks for listening.